When I was a teenager, I didn't know what real problems were. My world was completely arranged according to the rules set by my parents. Everything was under control, and I never doubted that it would always be this way. My father, a successful businessman, was busy with his work, but always found time for me, although his care was often limited to giving me the most expensive toys and cars. He wanted me to be like him, successful, carefree, wealthy, powerful, and surrounded by beautiful women. My mother was a socialite, always in the spotlight, attending fashionable parties, under the flashes of cameras, among people who considered themselves the elite. I was their pride. At school, I was the center of attention. My life was full of parties, clubs, and luxury cars, of which I had no fewer than the most popular guys. I didn't have to work or put in any effort. Everything I wanted, I got. By that time, I already knew how to drive cars that many could only dream of having in their garage. But behind all of this, one feeling was growing: emptiness. I didn't know what true friendship or love was. People were just a means to an end for me. They had no real value unless they could bring me some benefit. I thought it would always be this way, that in life, the most important thing was external prosperity, because that was the ultimate measure of success. I was 18 years old, and the whole world truly seemed to be mine. I felt like everything revolved around me, and there was no room for doubt or fear. But I didn't realize that happiness wasn't just about wealth and attention. It was somewhere deep inside, and I didn't even know how to find it. My life turned upside down when I met her. Karina. She was so special. I couldn't believe that this girl, who seemed like perfection, could be mine. We started dating, and everything was as perfect as I was used to. Expensive restaurants, trips around the world shopping. But somewhere in this perfect world, I lost sight of the most important thing: trust. It never crossed my mind that the world I lived in might be an illusion. I noticed that Karina had become a little distant, but I attributed it to her being busy or tired. Then one day, she confessed that she was seeing my best friend, Pavel. I couldn't believe my ears. It was a stab in the back that I never expected. They both tried to explain their actions, but at that moment, I no longer cared. Everything I had considered important collapsed. I couldn't forgive them. I was furious, and that feeling wouldn't leave me. All I could think about was revenge, about how to vent my anger. But none of my actions helped me cope with the inner disappointment. At that moment, I felt that the emptiness inside me had been filled with rage and despair. I realized that everything I had was just an outer shell, with nothing real behind it. After learning about the betrayal, the world became a dark and cold place for me. I couldn't understand how it happened, how the people closest to me could be so cruel. I couldn't believe it was really happening. Everything around me became empty and meaningless. I could no longer look either Karina or Pavel in the eyes. I was so confused that I started looking for answers, but in all the wrong places. I drowned myself in alcohol, trying to numb the pain, but it only deepened my suffering. It was a dull attempt to silence the anxiety, but it brought no relief. I didn't know what to do with myself. I couldn't understand what was happening inside me. There was despair, anger, and fear. Fear that I no longer knew who I was, and that I had become a completely different person. When I returned home, my family already knew everything. My father, as always, was cold. His words didn't touch me because I was too consumed by my own thoughts and pain. My mother, on the other hand, was worried and tried to comfort me with love, but her words didn't reach me either. I was so resentful and filled with hatred that I couldn't perceive anything beyond my own suffering. "You're acting like a foolish child," my father said with disdain when he saw me in that state. "Maybe it's time to grow up." I looked at him and didn't understand what he was saying. He had no idea what I was going through. He didn't know what it meant to be betrayed by those you love. I was scared because I felt lost. I clenched my fists, holding back the urge to yell back, but instead, I just threw in his face. "What do you even know about me? You never cared. All you do is make money, and you don't give a damn about your family." He didn't answer. I saw exhaustion and disappointment in his eyes. His words flew past me because, at that moment, I couldn't process anything. I couldn't feel his pain or concern. The only thing that mattered to me was my own suffering. And then something happened that I will remember for the rest of my life. My father, without saying a word, got up from his chair, walked over to me, and slapped me across the face. It was unexpected. I didn't even have time to react, and the pain that shot through my face was so strong that it felt like I couldn't breathe. "You will never be a man until you learn to take responsibility for your actions," he said through clenched teeth. His words rang in my ears like echoes of alarm, but I felt they only confirmed my own doubts. I grabbed the car keys from the table and, without saying a word, rushed out of the house. The door slammed shut behind me, and I realized that the only thing I wanted at that moment was freedom. Freedom from everything that surrounded me. I didn't know what to do, but I knew one thing. I had to leave. I couldn't stay here. I headed to the garage. My eyes landed on the Lamborghini Aventador, the very car that was my father's pride. It was a symbol of his success, a symbol of his power. But for me, this car became something more than just an expensive accessory. It was a path to destruction. I wanted to take it, to escape, and to feel like I had control over my life, if only for a moment. I didn't think about the consequences. I didn't think about how I might destroy something else that was important. I just wanted to leave. My hand reached for the keys, and I felt a surge of adrenaline rising inside me. I got into the car, closed the doors, and started the engine on the first try. The sound it made filled me with the sense of power that I so desperately lacked. But, as always, life doesn't forgive such reckless actions. On one of the turns, I lost control. The wheels slipped, and everything around me became a blur. Time slowed down. The car flipped over several times, and there was nothing I could do. The pain that filled my body was unbearable. Darkness consumed me. I woke up in the hospital. At first, it was hard to understand where I was. Everything around me was hazy and distorted. Slowly, the picture became clearer, but the feeling was like waking up from a nightmare. The sounds I heard, the beeping of medical machines, muted voices seemed distant and unimportant. But one thing I realized immediately: I couldn't move my arms or legs. Panic hit me so fast that it took my breath away. I tried to scream, but no sound came out. The pain inside was no less than what I had felt at the moment of the crash. And then, in that moment, as I tried to understand what was happening to me, I saw them. My parents were sitting by my bed. My mother, as always, was in tears, squeezing my hand. Her face was a mixture of love and pain. My father, on the other hand, sat a little further away, his face stern and tired, but in his eyes, I saw something new: worry. He looked at me as if he had suddenly realized he had lost me. It was a look I did not expect. They were both silent. I couldn't understand why they weren't yelling at me, blaming me. They were just there, and in some way, that hurt even more than if they had shouted accusations. Because I realized that I was no longer the perfect son they had expected. I had become someone who had disappointed them, and that was killing me. I tried to speak but couldn't. There was a weight in my chest, and I just wanted to disappear. My mother was crying, and my father just sat and stared without saying a word. That silence made me feel even more helpless. Time passed, and as I remained in the hospital, I faced something I could no longer avoid: my guilt and my mistakes. My body was healing, but my soul remained shattered. Lying in my hospital bed, I started looking at my life from a different perspective. I didn't know how many days had passed, but one day, I felt that everything I had lost could perhaps be regained. It wasn't about money or power. I realized that there were things in this world far more valuable than that. I started thinking about those who live without love, without support, who suffer as I once did but have no one by their side. And at some point, I understood that I needed to change. When I was finally allowed to leave the hospital, I immediately began searching for ways to make a difference. I passed by an abandoned building that had once been a shelter. The walls bore the marks of time and decay, but something about that place made me stop. I walked inside and saw elderly people who, for various reasons, could no longer care for themselves, and children left without families. I realized that this was where I could start my new life. It wasn't about big money and luxury. It was about something simple, yet incredibly important: helping others. I wrote to my father, telling him that I was leaving to work at this shelter. My mother supported me, despite all her worries. She said she was proud of me, though her words seemed too simple, almost emotionless. but I knew they were sincere. My father, upon hearing about my decision to change my life, did not react immediately, but there was something strange in his eyes. It was a look I had seen before, but now it felt different. At the shelter, I faced many difficulties. There was no luxury, no money, but there was something far more important: the opportunity to change the lives of those in need. I began teaching children, playing with them, helping them grow, teaching them to be independent despite everything they had been through. I realized that here, among these people, I had begun to find the life I had been searching for all these years. And though the path was difficult, I was no longer the lost teenager who only wanted superficial success. I was part of something bigger. I was helping others, and that brought me joy. I understood that happiness isn't about what you can take from life, but about what you can give to others. One day, standing in front of the old shelter building, I realized that this was my new path. In what I was doing, I found meaning. And at that moment, I understood that love and caring for others are what truly make a person rich in soul and life. I no longer felt empty or alone because I was part of something important and eternal. My journey was just beginning. A few weeks passed since I started working at the shelter. I felt more and more how my life was changing. Here, among the children, I finally understood that what matters is not what you have, but what you give. But the most unexpected thing for me was meeting Anya. She was a volunteer, and from the first moment, I felt that she was special. Anya was kind, sincere, and her eyes radiated a warmth I hadn't felt in a long time. We started talking, and her simple presence in my life began to mean more than any expensive things or the luxury I was used to. Anya didn't look at me as the spoiled rich kid I once was. She saw a person with inner struggles, with pain and regrets. And she didn't judge me, didn't pity me. She was just there, genuinely interested in how I was doing and what I was going through. In her eyes, for the first time, I felt like I could be worthy, and that was important. We talked a lot, and I felt that not only my life, but also my relationships with others were changing. Anya became more than just a friend. She became my partner on this new path. Together with her, I continued working at the shelter, helping the children, but now I was doing it with someone who shared my values and beliefs. Over time, Anya became more than just a friend to me. She taught me that love is not just beautiful words and gifts. It is support, care, sincerity, and the willingness to share the hardships of life with those who need it. We started building our life not in search of wealth or fame, but in search of what could make the world a better place. With Anya, I began to understand that true value is not in what you own, but in what you can give. In her eyes, I saw that love and care are the things that truly matter. We started helping the children in the shelter together, building meaning not just in our relationship, but in giving hope to those left without support. And so, I started a new life, not for myself, but for others. And now, when I look back, I understand that thanks to Anya and the children we helped, I finally found true happiness. And it wasn't in expensive cars or lavish parties. It was in caring for others, in giving my love and energy to those who needed it. Together with Anya, we continued working at the shelter, and I knew this path was the only right one. Years have passed. Now, I often return to that shelter. Sometimes, I meet people who were with me during those difficult days, and looking back, I see how much I have changed. I have learned to appreciate what is real, to seek meaning in life. If you are reading these lines and standing at a crossroads, remember, money, status, and the external signs of success are nothing but an illusion. True happiness is not in what you have, but in what you can give. Don't make my mistakes. Stop before it's too late, and start living for real.